Good evening. Welcome. My name is Jim Lawrence. Welcome to this month's All Hands meeting. Each month, our goal is very simple, yet very powerful, to really just shine a light on the areas in our community that still need change and collective action. Yesterday was a historical day for all of us, one that reminds me how far that we've come, but also how much work that remains before San Mateo County truly becomes the county of choice for all of us. Tonight, our two speakers will bring focus on issues that continue to demand our attention, our courage, and our persistence. As I often remind myself and all of you, meaningful change rarely happens overnight. It takes all of us working together to move from awareness to action, from hope to real progress. So let's lean in tonight, listen closely, and commit to doing our part. Because change just doesn't happen to us, it happens through us. Again, welcome.
Good evening. I'm Alexis Lewis, and tonight I have the pleasure of introducing Ekene Okobi, who is an interdisciplinary artist who blends performance, education, and research into experiences designed to promote respectful, productive dialogue. She has developed and facilitated educational programming for Urban Stage, New York Theater Workshop, and the NYU Skee Ball Center for the Performing Arts. In 2018, I should say, Ekene's 36-year-old brother, Shinaju, was killed by the San Mateo County Sheriff's deputies using tasers after he was walking down the sidewalk in the afternoon in Millbrae. The lack of transparency and accountability about Shinaju's killing was one of the main reasons that Fixing San Mateo County was created. And now I'll turn it over to you, Ekene.
Thank you so much, Alexis, and thank you, Fixing San Mateo County. Thank you, Island United Church, for continuing to not only just honor my brother's memory, keep him alive, but also use the tragedy of his murder to really push for real, meaningful reform in San Mateo County. I want to talk a little bit about the idea of this concept of less lethal methods of law enforcement control. So I think the most horrifying aspect of my brother's murder is that he was literally electrocuted to death in public. It's a very humiliating way to die. It's a horrible way for family members to kind of remember a loved one's last moments. But most importantly, things like tasers, rubber bullets were created as a way supposedly for law enforcement to enforce the law, as it were, using methods that were not lethal, that are not lethal. But the problem with these methods is that it doesn't address the culture of law enforcement. It doesn't address the roots of law enforcement. And so if you believe that you can give a quote unquote less lethal method to law enforcement with the goal or the aim of decreasing the amounts of civilians' deaths, the deaths of unarmed people, it's kind of missing the point. And I think this is one of the reasons why I agree wholeheartedly with Fixing San Mateo's goal to increase citizen oversight of law enforcement. There are a lot of movements afoot to make law enforcement more accountable to taxpayers who, after all, are the ones responsible for their salaries. And what's phenomenal is the pushback that we get from law enforcement to be monitored by the people who are actually paying their salaries. And I think that's something that we need to think about as we continue pushing for law enforcement to be more responsive for the communities they're aiming to protect. I think another interesting thing is the idea of who is law enforcement for, who feels safe around law enforcement, and why would there be any differences amongst and across demographics? And I think, there is video that exists of the moments leading up to Chinedu's passing. And what is clear is that the officer who initiated this horrific string of events, literally, it was that Chinedu stood out for him, that he saw him. Chinedu was walking while Black, and this officer saw him and then tried to get my brother's attention. And my brother he did not trust law enforcement. He's not the only male family member I have who does not trust law enforcement. So because he did not trust law enforcement, he chose not to come over when called. And that really was what instigated his murder. And although San Mateo County has paid a settlement to my niece, Chinedu's daughter, as well as my mother, there really is no admission of the harm that has been caused. Nobody's been charged in his murder. And so this is why it's all the more important for people across the state, across the country, quite frankly, around the world, to continue pushing law enforcement to be more accountable. And if that means citizen oversight, if that means redirecting the way that police officers and other law enforcement personnel do their jobs, then that's what we need to continue pushing for. Because right now, I think it could be argued that law enforcement does not serve all the people who pay their taxes. I think also the other interesting thing to note is that in the recent days, we've seen the harm that law enforcement are inflicting on communities of color across the country at the direction of the president. California supposedly is a sanctuary state filled with a lot of sanctuary cities. But the fact of the matter is, there are a number of law enforcement who are coordinating and cooperating with ICE as they sort of wreak this path of destruction across our communities, destruction causing destruction and pain that will be felt for generations. And it may feel as if we don't have any agency in this situation, but I think even just keeping these issues front of mind, making sure that people understand and recognize that this is not right, we will be able to make some change. As it is, UC Berkeley has now just instituted a database that actually tracks misconduct by police. And I don't know how many of you know how hard it is to get public records on police misconduct, but it's very difficult, the same way that it's very difficult to get any charges brought up against police officers. So the fact that UC Berkeley, and I do work for UC Berkeley, so and I do actually work for the journalism school where this misconduct database is partially housed. So I'm not just, touting my current employer. I am using that and holding that up as an example of what can happen when people remain focused and remain steadfast and remain clear on the goals. We really do need to protect each other. We need to make sure that our communities are safe. And we need to make sure that law enforcement understands who they truly work for and really takes to heart their purported goal of protection. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you all so much again for attending this meeting. And I would again like to thank Fix and San Mateo for keeping Chinedu's memory alive. And I really do hope that everyone understands that we have to do this together in order to keep our community members safe. Thank you.
Good evening to all who are present. My name is Deacon Lauren Patton McCombs, and I'm currently serving at Christ Episcopal Church in Portola Valley and Woodside, and a member of Peninsula Solidarity Cohort and Fix and San Mateo. I think at this time, it might be a good point to just take a little bit of a pause and a quiet for just a bit to honor the words that she spoke about her brother. And also at this time, I would like us to have a few moments of silence, also honoring all the lives that have been lost on the year anniversary of the conflict in Gaza. This evening, I recognize that we all come from a kaleidoscope of backgrounds, faith traditions, and spiritual beliefs. But I am hopeful that we are all united in coming together to make a difference in preventing unnecessary deaths at the hands of law enforcement through the use of tasers. This time, I'd like to offer a prayer honoring the life of Chinedu Okobi, who was killed 7 years ago on October 5th. Let us pray. We pray for all those who have had to face racial injustice and unnecessary incarceration at the hands of law enforcement. We pray for all those who have been traumatized by mistreatment by law enforcement. We pray for all those whose lives ended too early at the hands of law enforcement. May we come together this evening to work collaboratively to hear each other's stories, united in our mission to end the use of tasers by law enforcement. Amen.
Thanks, everybody, for inviting the Coalition for Justice and Accountability to be part of this program this evening. I want to just say that the Coalition has a lot of things in common with FxSMC San Mateo in terms of our coalition started in 2003 after the tragic death of Bikal T. Tran, who was shot and killed by a San Jose police officer. And over the last 22 years, the coalition has been an advocate for humane police practices, including the banning of tasers. We've been involved in different workshops on police misconduct and the inherent dangers of tasers. But I want to just, in terms of complete transparency, say that after Bikal died in 2003, in fact, the coalition initially thought, well, maybe these tasers are a good option. Maybe if the police had tasers, she wouldn't have died. We came to the conclusion after some deep study and reflection that that was an incorrect position, that in fact, as we know now, tasers kill, tasers are lethal weapons. And so we now are dedicated to trying to have tasers banned, stop the use of tasers, because we've just seen too many lives shattered, too many people being killed by tasers. So in 2017, former Sheriff Lori Smith actually brought a proposal to the Board of Supervisors to arm all the in-custody deputies with tasers. The Board of Supervisors declined her request. In November of 2022, she came back to the board asking that not only that the deputies that are on the enforcement side and in custody, that they all be armed with tasers. The board again declined to request. And then in May of 2024, the recently elected Sheriff Johnson presented his taser proposal to arm basically all of his deputies, both on the enforcement side and the custody side, with tasers. The Board of Supervisors declined his request and requested he come back with some kind of pilot project. And so in September of 2024, the board, on a vote of 3-2, decided to endorse a taser pilot project where 75 tasers would be purchased as part of this pilot project. And so that right now, there are actually 60 tasers that are being used by the in-custody deputies in Santa Clara County. And we understand that as of today, that the tasers have been deployed 9 times, but have been actually unholstered another 40 times. So we're in deep disagreement with the use of tasers and even the use of the pilot project. But what we want to do now is kind of talk about some of the issues we've seen as we've kind of studied the issue And I'm going to call on Raymond to start first. Go ahead, Raymond.
Good evening. My name is Raymond Goins. I'm with the Coalition for Justice and Accountability. I am also a communication associate with Fixing San Mateo County. And tasers, as Ms. Okobi represented, are disproportionately used against people of color. With 10 induced deaths, what that represents is the fear of every Black man and every person of color that encounters law enforcement. Law enforcement has historically abused every tool they have had at their disposal since they have started using law enforcement tools against people of color. Tasers is like, to me, selling people snake oil, where they use it as a de-escalation tool, but as you can see, the result of it can end up in death. Being a Black man, I would never want to be electrocuted by a taser. And being somebody that's formerly incarcerated, there is no safe place for tasers to be in the jail system. It's my understanding that San Mateo County Sheriff's Department has tasers in their jails. And if somebody that is in jail gets tasered, there are no soft surfaces in jail. When you get tasered, your body collapses and you lose all function of your body. And when you fall, your head will hit something very hard, whether it be a metal table, a sink, a toilet, or even the floor. Policing in America, as you can see, is no one agrees is fundamentally right or equal. Law enforcement does not need tasers. They don't need more weapons. They need more. They don't need more de-escalation tools. They need better understanding of how to approach people and communicate with people. With that, I'd like to pass on to Sean.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Allen. I'm a member of the Coalition for Justice Accountability. I'm the current president of the San Jose Silicon Valley NAACP. Although I'm not here in that capacity, I am a retired law enforcement officer, and prior to being incarcerated, prior to being hired as law enforcement, I was actually formerly incarcerated for something I didn't do. Throughout my career, I focused on things like de-escalation. And when I say focus, I taught at the academy level. I taught in our jails on patrol, people things like de-escalation, and also during my career, I was presented with going to school to become a taser instructor, or actually back at the time we called it a react bell, was a separate device, which I refused to do once I read the taser warnings. Or the company's warnings about the use of the electric belt, which said that I could die. I have asthma, or I could defecate or urinate myself, amongst other things, and it forewarned us about the use of tasers. So as an instructor, I refused that training, and I was also against the use of tasers. I say to say, even as a supervisor manager, I commanded our tactical unit. And my use of force was because of my assignments were what I would consider relatively high. I say that to say that my use of force solely was very low. I was responding to the assistance of other officers and things that got out of hand, and I was assisting them. I say this to say that in the situations that I was involved in, where I was solely involved in use of force, almost every time it was involving someone who was mentally ill, and the way I navigated through that interaction was to give them space, to allow them to process what's going on, and as part of the de-escalation process. What happens with use of force is when it is directly evident of communication failure, and that's something the training is not emphasized enough in the academy, and in all academies. Like I said, I taught at the academy, so there is no really a real language or real instruction in the academy on the presumption of innocence and in treating people humanely. The use of force data I've seen has always been disproportionately impacting Black and brown people more than others. And just to get back to what I'm saying, when you treat people humanely, you have less use of force. The other issue that's represented is, so when we talk about the use of force continuum and the weapons, and there are weapons, not tools, or weapons involved in law enforcement, the most effective weapon is a law enforcement officer's presence, and the data shows that every time, over and over again. You see an instance where they put police officers at certain intersections and certain they perceive problematic areas, and so when you have that representation, you don't need force. And so your culture in policing is historically predominantly white male. And we're talking about a lot of discrimination across the board in terms of even hiring practices in the 70s and 80s. Just before I started, there was height requirements and so on and so forth, and women could work in certain places. So our union leadership across the nation is predominantly white. You have this culture that's not accepting of others, even inside the culture of law enforcement. So when we're policing and the interactions we have within our community in service of the community, that's not also represented as well. It's not taught. It's not asked of the law enforcement structure and the personnel. So I said to say tasers fail. You're going to have more people killed. They're unpredictable in the results, and anytime you have issues where there's predisposed issues with people's heart and other medical conditions, the lethality is increased. It is not a weapon that is less than lethal. Thank you.
Okay, I think next we have you, Victor.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Victor Sin from the Santa Clara County chapter of the ACLU of Northern California. Exxon, the manufacturer of Taser, has an extensive 8-page warning or disclaimer. By warning police departments regarding the risk of death and serious injury when a Taser is improperly used, Exxon has effectively shifted liability from itself to police departments and local governments. It is the cities and counties, not Exxon, that are being sued. And in these 8 pages, the word weapon appears more than 100 times. So Exxon itself refers to Taser as a weapon, not a de-escalation device. The warning advises users not to deploy the Taser weapon in the areas of the face, eyes, throat, chest, and a list of body parts. The warning further cautions not to use the Taser weapon on a variety of people, including the elderly, pregnant women, people suffering from asthma, drug intoxication, and heart problems. So with all these disclaimers, there's hardly any situation where Taser can be deployed safely in the real world. This is because in general, we don't know if a person has any medical susceptibility because many health conditions are not externally visible. So the only arguably safe situation is during training, which is performed in a controlled setting, where there's usually a mat placed on the floor in case the person falls, and where there are people standing by to help if needed. But then, guess what? Even in the controlled setting, where Exxon employees are tased as part of their toxic corporate culture, Exxon requires the exposed candidates or the exposure candidates to sign a waiver, forfeiting their right to sue Exxon for any exposure-related injury. The waiver warns of the potential for death at least 12 times. So Taser is a deadly weapon. And I'm passing the mic back to Richard.
Thank you, Victor. So I wanted to talk about, I mean, there is a cost to taxpayers, that's for sure, but really it's the devastating impact on the families, on the individuals who are either die or tortured by tasers. There was an extensive Reuters report which reviewed 442 wrongful death cases in which tasers were a factor that may have caused deaths. They found in that Reuters report that 193 cases resulted in $172 million being paid by governments or their insurers. We did some further research of media, and we found another 29 cases that totaled $143,350,000. Of those additional 29 cases, 19 of those cases involved either a Black or Latinx individual. One case involved a Pacific Islander. Again, there's certainly a cost to taxpayers, but really there is a deep cost to the families. And I wanted to just run through a few examples of some of the cases that we want to highlight briefly. So first would be Jerry Blasingame, who was 65 years of age, was left paralyzed after being tasered by a police officer in Atlanta, Georgia. The compensation was $40 million. The next case involved Damon Grimes, who died at 15 years of age. State police in Michigan killed him. The compensation was $12 million. Again, his life ended at the age of 15. The next case involved Jamal Sutherland, who at 31 years of age died after being tasered numerous times in jail by sheriff deputies in South Carolina. The compensation was $10 million. The next case involving Jim Rogers, who died after a police officer tasered him at least 10 times in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Compensation was $8 million. The next case involved John Hernandez, who died after police officers tasered him at least numerous times. He has suffered from severe brain damage. This is in Sacramento. Compensation was $5.2 million. The next case, which you are all familiar with, was Ken Okobi, who died after San Mateo County Sheriff tasered him, killed him numerous times. Compensation was $4.5 million. The next case involved Sorrel Shiflett, who at age 36 was left with brain bleed, soldier injury. San Leandro police tasered him. Compensation was $3.9 million. The next case involved Johnny Holman, age 62. He died after Atlanta police officer tasered him. Compensation was $3.8 million. And the last case we wanted to highlight was a case involving Dante Wright. I'm sure everybody is aware of this case. Died after police officers shot him with a handgun, mistaking it for a taser. This is in Minnesota. Compensation was $3.5 million. Again, this just highlights a few of the cases. And again, the point of this is that there's a devastating impact on the families, on the individuals. Certainly there is a cost to taxpayers, but the impact on families and individuals is really devastating. I'll pass it over to Susan to talk about some of the health concerns.
Yeah, my name is Susan Hayase. I'm with CJA and also with San Jose Nikkei Resistors, which is a community organization based in San Jose, Japantown. So health concerns. So as Victor noted, Axon knows that tasers are deadly, but they also have a strong marketing campaign that touts the safety of tasers. And the clients, the sheriff's departments and police departments repeat this message over and over about how safe they are. But this message is false. Axon and law enforcement agency customers cite scientific studies to back up their claims of safety. But this is to let you know that these citations constitute misinformation and disinformation. There was a meta-study that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, which reviewed many of these studies and critiqued them on the basis of methodological quality and bias. And they concluded that you cannot scientifically draw the conclusion that taser use is safe. And you cannot draw the conclusion that the evidence in these studies represent real-life field situations. The studies cited by Axon use pigs, as well as police officer and corporate employee volunteers under very controlled situations that Victor described. Also, the research evidence on the dose response effects among potential high-risk groups is non-existent and also is not feasible due to ethical considerations. So high-risk groups cannot be tested with tasers. And these high-risk groups include pregnant women, persons with pre-existing cardiac vulnerabilities, mental, emotional, psychiatric injuries, frail elderly, people with asthma, severe exhaustion, and drug intoxication. So many of these medical vulnerabilities may be undiagnosed and not visible to the observer or even the person themselves. So lastly, I want to bring your attention to a letter from county experts in strong opposition to the use of tasers. The medical professionals from the Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, Valley Homeless Healthcare, expressed their strong opposition to tasers in the jails in a letter dated February 10th, 2023. And they state, quote, "At best, correctional facilities should maintain their purported focus on rehabilitation rather than intensifying weaponry that may be used to inflict harm. Ultimately, a public health approach to reducing trauma in jail will benefit the families and communities to which incarcerated folks are returning. Taxpayer dollars should be diverted from plans to purchase tasers and instead be put toward investment in more robust mental health and substance use treatment." Also, I do want to point out that information that we have recently obtained from the sheriff acknowledges the medical dangers after the fact. Their use of the taser includes procedures for the nursing staff, must be nursing staff, highly skilled medical professionals for removing the barbed projectile, as well as detailed information for hospitalization and medical evaluation over a prolonged period of time because the dangers to an individual are so serious. So to sum up, the evidence shows that taser use is not safe. It's potentially very deadly. There are no reasonable ways to use it that don't endanger people who have pre-existing medical vulnerabilities. And it's not a safe weapon, regardless of what Axon or law enforcement agencies say. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I think next is Aram's going to talk about really there's no safe place for tasers. Go ahead, Aram.
Thank you all. Wonderful speakers, the whole event, and I appreciate the invitation. So I wanted to address something a little off topic, but the issue has been raised. Tasers, in the context that they're actually used, almost always on unarmed people are not less lethal. They're the most lethal of the intermediate force weapons, from batons to police canines to control holds, you name it. None of those others kill 1,000 people, okay? Batons, canines, as ugly as those weapons are, they don't kill. The tasers do. So again, in the context that they're almost always used on unarmed individuals, it's by far and away the most lethal. And when you hear somebody say that it's a less lethal weapon, you must correct them immediately. Language matters. So it's a deceptively simple thought process here. Tasers are unsafe for officers to use in deadly force situations. So if I have a gun, or I have a knife, or some other weapon that the officer perceives as being deadly, the instructions are clear. Do not use a taser. And why, you might ask, would that be the case? They fail 50% of the time. They fail 50% of the time. So of course, a police officer, and Sean, you're going to maybe help me out here, are trained specifically, if an individual has a gun, a knife, or some other deadly force weapon, do not use the taser, shoot center mass to kill. Sean, you're in law enforcement 34 years. Can you confirm that that's accurate?
That is accurate, yes.
So it can't be used in deadly force situation by the police officers. Okay, so what's left? Unarmed individuals whose vulnerabilities are unknown to the person using the taser, the police officer, the member of the sheriff's department. In that context, okay, we know that in 2005, the Northern California ACLU put out a report that said, even when officers in very controlled circumstances were tased, officers that had been vetted to make sure that they were healthy individuals had career-ending injuries in those very, very controlled situations, okay? And they sued, like anybody that would do in that situation. So the officer, I wrote a piece for the Mountain View Voice in 2006. The title was, "What Police Already Know, Tasers Are Unsafe." So let me go from there to the model taser policy put out by PERF, the Police Executive Research Forum, and Community-Oriented Police Services back in 2011. What they said in that report was, agencies should be aware that exposures to taser application during training could result in injury to personnel and is not recommended. So even in training sessions, the model taser report that was put out by those two very credible organizations, Police Executive we sort of form as a think tank, same with cops. And they said, you shouldn't even use them, even in very controlled circumstances. So do we see the irony there? They want to use them on us, but they don't even believe that they should be used on police officers in very tightly controlled situations. Now, what's the corroboration of this? Well, Victor's talked about it very eloquently, I might add, that the manufacturer's 8-page warning points out over and over again that tasers are not only a deadly weapon, but they, on each of the 8 pages, there is excruciating detail as to how those deaths can occur in multiple ways. They have warnings on each page. Tasers can result in death, 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 death. And then Victor also spoke about the manufacturers warning to their own employees, okay? The employees are encouraged to be tased, like an initiation rite, okay? And some bizarre kind of a differential is made here. The men that were tased had spotters, they were standing, they had a mat. The women employees were asked to lie face down on the mat, and they applied the taser probes to their back, and you heard these excruciating screams. But the bottom line irony is that Axon has so little confidence in their weapon that they ask their employees, and they require them to be tased in these situations, must sign a waiver that says, if you die or you're injured, you can't sue us. So clearly, Taser is not believing in their own product, and yet they unleash it on the public. So bottom line, they're not safe for the police to use in deadly force situations, and they're not safe for the police to use on vulnerable individuals. That's all I have to say at this point, except, actually, I'd like to give you just a little bit more. And Richard, you cut me off because I know I have another topic and I don't want to go on too long.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Former police chief Greg Sir in San Francisco, after the activists up there kept tasers from the San Francisco police as opposed to the sheriff's office, threw up his arms at one point and said, I'll be damned, there's just too much calculus. This 8 pages of warnings makes it almost impossible for the officers to use tasers. They don't know where to use them. As Victor said, you can't shoot somebody in the face, the chest, the groin, on and on and on. So what are you going to do? Ask the person to lay down on a mat and we're going to apply it there? Ed Davis, who was the former police chief in Boston, said, the warning made the weapon impractical to use and gave many of us the impression that we weren't getting the full story. I didn't want to take the risk. The potential for litigation costs absolutely was a factor. Now, we also had a horrible case. And I'm going to look here for a second for my...
Actually, Aaron, why don't we kind of go on to the next section, and then we could...
Okay, sure.
Yeah, let's go on to the next section now.
You'd like
Aaron's going to talk about the campaign strategies.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
So this is called Campaign for Keeping Police Tasers Off Our Streets and Out of Our Jails. It's sort of a multi-pronged approach. So as Richard talked about back in 2017, when then Sheriff Roy Smith wanted to bring tasers in, we wrote a piece for the legal journal, the Daily Journal here. And here's what we said. One of our first strategies was to ensure that members of the community were as fully informed as possible regarding the risks that tasers pose to human life. We reviewed the materials on tasers and we got ourselves current on the nuance of the issue. Next, we scheduled meetings over, a 7-month period with key elected officials, non-elected officials we felt could influence the sheriff's decision. This included all members of the Board of Supervisors who would ultimately vote on the issue. Then we met with the sheriff herself and her command staff. We met with the public defender of Santa Clara County, the district attorney, and county council. So we did repeated education of all those folks at the top. So that's one thing that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to be, whoever wants to devise a comprehensive strategy. It's very time consuming. It requires a lot of energy, a lot of meetings. Then, of course, we've talked about that. Susan said it eloquently. You have to overcome Axon's propaganda. Axon is full of corporate propaganda. You have to pay attention to it. They don't tell the truth. They misinform the public. That's something that we have to look for when we're developing strategy. We have to meet, so to speak, with the enemy. We've got to sit down with the sheriff, himself, and meet and find out how they've been poisoned by the corporate propaganda that Axon puts out constantly and relentlessly. When they say Taser is a tool, you have to correct them. It's a weapon, and it's recently the Taser 10 now, unlike the prior iteration of the Taser, because it uses gunpowder, has been designated a firearm now. So when they say tool, no, we say weapon or firearm. The other thing that you've got to do, and we've gone back to our board of supervisors and their aides repeatedly. You've got to go back and educate them and update them, because Axon is constantly in their ears trying to sell these weapons. Now we're 57 out of 58 counties have tasers. We're the one county that does not yet have tasers, both in our jails. And you need to find a champion on the board of supervisors. In our county, Susan Ellenberg, one of the members of the board of supervisors, has repeatedly refused to accept tasers at any level. She voted against them in the jails or on the streets. Clearly, you must spend more time than the other side understanding the details of tasers so you can correct people, including the sheriff when he makes misstatements, or she. We are considering going outside of the jail and having a protest action. We want to know why they're hiding the body-worn camera footage of the deployments. We want to know why they won't give us the medical records. We want to know why they won't give us the use of force records. Richard and I, since May 30th of this year, have filed 7 public records requests with county council, and we've gotten almost nothing. They're stonewalling us and they're misusing the Public Records Act. So you got to keep filing those requests. And one of the things that we do is when we file a request, we generally have some kind of editorial comments, and we send all of our public records requests to the board of supervisors, because they're going to make the final decision. So we try to combat their propaganda with our good information. Keep your eyes on the prize. Go back to the decision makers, the board of supervisors. No matter how many times you've got to go back, how much more information you've got to give. We have a binder that, what is it, Richard, about 6 inches thick at this point, over 20 years, which of course we're willing to share with you all in an electronic version or hard copies as you develop your strategies. Each county, of course, is going to have a strategy that's unique to them. So you all will figure out, and of course you're already well ahead of the curve on tasers already. We write the press, articles to the press regularly. We also love to have the press interview us on tasers so we can put out the correct information while the other side's putting out misinformation. It's critical to have people like Raymond Goins out there involved, people that are impacted by the system. Like Raymond can give a totally different view and credibility based on his experience in the jail. And I might add, we balance that off with having Sean Allen, who spent 34 years in law enforcement. And Sean, can I ask you this one question? Are you opposed to tasers in the jails and on the enforcement side?
I'm opposed to the use of tasers by law enforcement everywhere, anywhere.
Thank you. We are ready and able to meet with you all informally, maybe on a Saturday afternoon. I want to thank you again for your time and attention. Appreciate every one of you that spoke tonight.
Yeah, and I'd like to again offer my thanks to Dixon Group for inviting us. We're happy to try to answer any questions that have come up, and again, we appreciate the time and the interest.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us and for this fantastic information. And we do have some great questions in the chat. The first one is for the folks from CGA. CJA is in Philadelphia after a Black man was shot to death by the police. The settlement they reached with the victim's family actually required them to outfit the entire police department with tasers as less lethal. How would you respond if someone, for example, an elected official brings up this case?
Yeah, so actually Aaron and I had noticed that case and we were really troubled by it. We're trying to figure out how to respond, but again, based on our research, it's a lethal weapon that's going to kill, that has killed people, will continue to kill people, and that's kind of our response. We're troubled by that as being part of a settlement. I don't know if others have another response to that.
I would just say that whoever that group was, I'm sure that they were very authentic and had a lot of integrity in what they were doing. But obviously, if they had studied tasers closely, the last thing they would be asking for is to arm law enforcement with another deadly weapon. And I think I tried to answer, maybe not well, but it's not a less lethal weapon. It's almost always used on unarmed people. And so you got to tell them over and over again, this is not a tool. It's a weapon. It's now been classified as a firearm, and it's deadly. And I forgot to give you this statistic for murders: 32% of people who die as a result of tasers, African American.
32. Okay.
Yeah, you know,
Thank
I'd
you.
like to add something quick, just for the group in terms of how you should look at it, and to answer your question. I spoke in last year, I think in Sacramento, from their Public Safety and Justice Committee on the legislation floor about police dogs. And one of the things I would reference just to help you with your train of thought is look at the police officer's response to these things. So if a police officer was disarmed and the taser was turned against him or her, the policies and what we're taught in law enforcement is to respond with deadly force, because it's perceived that if we get tased, we could die.
Wow.
Right? The same thing with dogs. So
Yeah.
you see with dogs, when they're uncontrollably biting people in the public and people are dying from them, look at the cases where police dogs are turning to police officers. Almost every case, and there's some recent cases, even I think one in Fresno last year, the police officer shot the dog.
Right.
The police officer said they're in fear for their life. So
Right.
use their logic and their policies, right?
Yeah.
And their train of thought. That's what you need to do. And that's to argue that point. That's a horrible point. I don't know how they got that through. But the reality is that me as a law enforcement officer, if you turn my taser on me, they're telling me to shoot you. Now, would I shoot you? No, because I don't have to do that. I have to justify the threat. But the reality is that's what they're teaching. And there's multiple cases that you can trace throughout the country where that's happened.
Okay.
Okay.
Great information. Thank you. Thank you. So Beth says, we tried to get tasers banned in the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office following Chinedu Okobi's killing. Activists convened a taser forum and had several renowned experts and dozens of community members speak out against tasers. Still, we were unsuccessful. Have activists in other communities been successful in getting rid of tasers? And if so, how did they do it?
We're not aware of anybody who's gotten rid of them. I mean, we've done our best to try to stop them from being fully deployed amongst the whole sheriff's department. Again, they wanted like 1,100 tasers. Right now they have 75, but the sheriff is trying to push to arm all of his deputies with tasers. So he's not giving up, and we're continuing to fight that.
Okay.
So I might add that Ray Samuels, who was the police chief in Little Newark, California, I had an opportunity to learn a lot from him, and he refused. He was a real student of tasers, to bring tasers to Little Newark, California. He said, I don't want to be in a situation where somebody that doesn't deserve to die, somebody that's got a traffic ticket, like Mr. Holman in Atlanta, dies because of the misuse of tasers. So he flat out denied bringing tasers to Little Newark, California. I believe now that he's passed away, I think they brought them in, but he was a very eloquent spokesperson the ACLU used, and a lot of folks did. And I've seen, and I think, Richard, we've seen small departments across the country where they have shove the tasers. And I'm sorry that I don't have that information as handy as I should.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So Sean, you just talked to us a little bit about turning it back on to police officers and, see their reaction. But how do officers feel about tasers in general? Could law enforcement officers and their associations or unions maybe be potential allies in the fight to get rid of tasers?
So yeah, to answer your question in short, yes, you can probably turn and get some allies. I'm the current vice president, former president of our supervisor manager union, and when I presented to our supervisor staff and management staff the taser warning, more than half of the people there didn't want anything to do with it. But we have this thing in California and across the country, this impunity they have, and the liability is put on, not put on the individual officer, it's put on the organization. So that's the way they act. They act without accountability because they know that they're going to be protected even if they make a mistake, and they're going to call it a mistake. And so one of our meetings we had as an organization with the DA of our county, when we spoke, I turned it around to them. I said, "Hey, this is what is taught. This is, and so why aren't you prosecuting officers with knowing that they're reading the directions in the taser acts on warning with the understanding that in every instance, I shouldn't say almost, it could lead to death." And he just got quiet. He couldn't answer that question.
Okay.
So the law enforcement community as a whole is going to be your struggle getting cops to come out and say something about it. I would tell you what my strategy would be, and I would be very frank with everyone. I would start with the minority, the female organization of police unions, and they have them. They have the Asian Police Officer Association, Noble for National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and so on and so forth. The female, the LGBTQ community, because those communities, I think, from my experience, will be more in touch with how the community perceives, and actually the factual basis around use of force, how it affects people of color and those people in those protected classes more so than our other communities.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. So in an ideal world, tasers are banned. Is there anything else, any other tool that is parallel that could be in use to maybe discourage an increase in the use of firearms?
So everything's about culture. So when we look at different, and I follow different counties and look at who's shooting who. Like for example, Santa Clara, where we have the 49ers, everyone knows where that is. It's just a very small jurisdiction, but in the county of Santa Clara, they were leading them in police shootings for a while, and you have to look at the leadership. So when I connected the problem, what I saw was that in Santa Clara, which is the only police department in our state where we have an elected police chief, the succession of police chiefs have been union leadership, right? So these officers feel protected, and they're shooting people again with the thought of impunity, right? And you see larger police cultures where you have like San Jose. San Jose, the safest big city, as they call it, they just gained that recognition again a few months ago. But they have a high level of police shootings, so there's a cost. And the officers are going to tell you, and the police department chiefs are going to tell you that that's the cost of doing business. It's not. It's a culture that we have to train the police departments and the leadership and get them to accept. And I'll give you an example, a real short example. I questioned the police chief of San Jose. This is my question to him: do you work with the public? He shrugged his shoulders and told me, well, in theory. So that's what you're getting. You have to talk to your police leaders, and then of course understand that police culture is driven by the elected sheriffs more so than the elected police chiefs. However, just so everyone's aware, they all in this state, they all have the same law enforcement attorneys that represent the state police chiefs and sheriffs. So it's driven by that entity, right? Very hard. And what you guys are doing is actually, I commend you a little bit in the process of getting and addressing your sheriff's accountability. But I would suspect really soon that you're going to get a lot of pushback from the rest of the sheriffs in the state of California to support her.
And could I
hopefully I answered your question.
Thank you. Yeah.
Could I add a little nuance on San Mateo County?
Sure.
You have Steve Wagstaff, who I know personally, who I've talked with. He's unfailingly polite. He's unfailingly right wing. Okay. And he and Jim Fox, his predecessor, for 40 years have never filed a case involving an officer-involved shooting or taser death in the entire history of the county. And that's not unique. These guys get all kinds of, they seem to represent only law enforcement interests. So until you get a different kind of prosecutor, doesn't matter what you do, the cops are not going to feel any threat about using tasers because they know they're not going to be prosecuted. We've got to get prosecutors to exercise their prosecutorial discretion in a different way. I can tell you with Oscar Grant's case, Tom Orloff was the prosecutor at the time. He didn't want to initially meet with the black community. He said, oh, one of you can come in. Eventually, there was so much community pressure that Orloff decided to file against Meserly. Okay, very rare circumstances. So you got to also go after the mindset of your prosecutors.
Thank you. And Raymond, I saw your hand up. Did you want to respond to one of the questions? Raymond?
I think Raymond dropped off because I
Oh,
don't see him
sorry.
anymore.
That's okay. Well, I want to thank you all very much for this very important talk and really, really good information. Personally, I think the public needs education because I think people have the idea, the general public, that tasers are safe, that they're less lethal, that they are a tool versus being a weapon. So thank you all very much. And from Fixing San Mateo County, I just have a few announcements for everyone. And the first one is please join us at our monthly happy hour this month, Tuesday, October 21st from 4:30 to 6:30 at Das Beer House in Redwood City. No RSVP is needed. Just come on down and spend time together, enjoying each other's company, getting to know each other. We love having time together and getting time to spend with each other. Secondly, our all hands meeting next month, which will be Tuesday, November 11th. Typically, we are the first Tuesday, but the first Tuesday next month is Election Day. So we're moving it down one Tuesday to the 11th. We will have Lisa Broderick of police2peace.org, which is an organization which seeks to restore the community trust in the police. And then finally, wrapping up this year, December 5th, Friday, December 5th, we will have our annual holiday gathering at the Domini Hoskins Black History Museum in Redwood City, and we would love to see you all there. So thank you very much. Nancy, is there anything else?
I have one final question.
Yes.
Jim Lawrence here. Can I buy and own a taser?
Oh.
Yes.
As in,
Yes, you can buy them off Amazon. They'll deliver to you. Yep.
Wow. The only other thing I'd add to Trina is it's really time to speak out to the Board of Supervisors in San Mateo County that we needed to appoint a permanent inspector general.
yes. Okay. Well, thank you all again for joining us. Very much appreciate it. And again, thank you to the panelists for this wonderful information. Ekene, thank you for being here. Your voice is definitely needed and very much appreciated. So take care, everyone, and we will see you next month, November 11th. But first at happy hour on the 21st. Okay, take care, everybody.